What's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel and thank you so much for choosing me today. So for today's video, I am going to be doing the Siam Lee case, and this case was requested, so thank you so much for that. Siam Lee was found in a sugarcane field, burnt. The only thing that could identify her was her nail polish. But what in the world happened to such a young girl? Like every other case, this case is definitely one that is sad. A very young life was lost, and in such an inhumane manner. But let's just get right into this video. Siam Lee was born in 1997 in Hong Kong. Her parents are Carmen Nan Lee and Howard Grienspan, if I'm not mistaken. Howard, Siam's dad, was a very wealthy businessman. Unfortunately for Siam's dad, he was murdered in 2005 in his Clifton penthouse. And after his death, there was a huge battle for Siam to claim her share of his estate. Life did become a little bit difficult. When Siam was 5 years old, Siam and Carmen moved back to Durban. Siam was able to attend a very good school, Crawford College, in Lalusha, Durban, thanks to her trust fund. But unfortunately, after school, the trust fund just ceased. She had no access to that money anymore. And that was when she was only 18 years old. Now, Siam and Carmen had to find ways to earn a living. Siam had initially worked as a waitress and a model. She was so beautiful, she fit that model image perfectly. But her income from waitressing and modeling just was not quite enough. So her mom brought her with her to work in a brothel in Durban North. The brothel was just another source of income for the mother and daughter duo. Carmen used to attend a private school in her earlier days, but then she left that private school in PMB, Pietermaritzburg, to pursue a career in dancing, which took her to Asia. Then she eventually came back to Durban to start a life with her daughter. The brothel did have an adult website where the ladies would advertise themselves. Siam was known to be very gentle, very caring. She was the type of girl who would capture a fly, try to safely get it out of harm's way. She would capture it in her hands and then let it go so it flies away safely. These characteristics would highlight Siam's caring nature. Now, in the brothel, Siam and Carmen worked closely together, and Carmen served as her protector and made sure that she never came into harm's way. Carmen had emphasized that Siam was not a prostitute or a sex worker. She strictly specialized in sensual massages, and this is how they were advertised on the adult website.
It's very important people understand that Siam was never ever a prostitute, and she was never ever going to become one. You know, this was a means to an end until trust fund would be reinstated, or she had saved enough to study and go teach or whatever.
Siam was absolutely beautiful. Now, because she was not an actual sex worker, this made her even more desirable because men looked at her but knew that they could not have her in the way that they would have the other girls. She only ever massaged, and even in her sessions, Carmen would be present. The mom and daughter duo were known as the instructor and student in training. Instructor being Carmen and student in training being Siam. Siam never did anything without Carmen being in the room. Fast forward to June 2017. Carmen was badly burnt with boiling water. Now, because of her injuries, she couldn't quite work. So Siam had to carry the load, and she assured her mom that she will be just fine. Now, fast forward to the 4th of January 2018. At only 20 years old, Siam was missing. There's two versions of the story. One version is as per the indictment that was read in court, and the second version is the confession, which I believe is what actually happened. Now, according to the indictment that was read in court, a gentleman by the name of Philani Ntuli had visited the adult website where Siam and Carmen would be advertised. According to the indictment that was read in court, Philani had visited the adult website where Siam and Carmen were advertising their services at the brothel. Philani had contacted Siam and another lady who works at the brothel, subsequently becoming their client. It is said that apparently Philani had gotten to a point where he had forced the other sex worker that he had hired to his home in Hillcrest at gunpoint. And that is where he would hold this particular sex worker hostage. It was reported that he apparently raped and verbally abused her. Now, around Siam's kidnapping, being the 4th of January, Siam had actually wanted to cut ties with Philani. But this made Philani very, very angry. Investigators believe that this is the reason why Philani eventually killed Siam. On the 4th, he visited the brothel where Siam worked, held her at gunpoint, and forced her into his vehicle, kidnapping her. She was held captive in his home until midnight. And in the early hours of January the 5th, 2018, was when Siam would be found dead. At this point of the indictment, all the information was alleged. They were still investigating. Siam would be found in a sugarcane field in the area of New Hanover. Siam's killer had poured petrol on her body and set her alight. The only thing that could identify her was her nail-polished fingernails. She suffered 90% burns and tissue charring. Her actual cause of death would be hemorrhage from head injuries. Now let's move on to the meat of this case. Now this is the account by private investigator Brad Nathanson, who ended up arresting Philani Ntuli based on the evidence they had found out to convict him. Now, what is absolutely crazy and just so tragic for young Siam was the fact that when she was found, she had no face and her teeth were completely gone.
She was lying in this dying swan pose, and this hand was not burnt. It was the same color. Her flesh was normal, and her nail varnish was on this hand. But when I looked into her face, she had a whole hole in her face. There was no face, and there were no teeth.
She was so charred from being burnt that the spot where she was found, even after a year later, nothing could grow in that spot where she was burnt. Now, as I said, Brad Nathanson would be the one who had received permission from police to arrest Philani as soon as he is able to catch him. And Brad would interview Philani and get a full confession as to how he killed Siam Lee. Now, according to the confession, Siam was raped repeatedly, so much so that her legs spasmed. Can you imagine that torture? And Pilani had confessed that he had to kill her because Siam had threatened to go to the police no matter what. Pilani was weird. He hated the fact that Siam had spasmed. So to put her out of her misery, for lack of a better phrase, he fetched a blanket from his garage, threw it over her face, and started bashing her head with a hammer. And he further explained that not only was he putting her out of her misery, but that he actually felt sorry for her. Brad explained that even whilst telling the story and confessing to what he had done to Siam, Pilani had no emotion whatsoever. Now, according to Brad, he is used to culprits or suspects being full of emotion, crying even. But when it came to Pilani, there was just no emotion, zero emotion. So, out of panic, Pilani had visited a petrol station, and it just so happened that when he visited that petrol station, it was within the 1 hour that the cameras were down. He had purchased 25 liters of petrol. However, despite the cameras being down, a petrol attendant did manage to recognize him. Now, at this point, he decided to drive to Caterage, but there were people there, so he couldn't particularly dump Siam's body where he initially planned to do so. So he continued on to another area by the name of New Hanover, and this was where he would decide to burn Siam's body. Siam would then be discovered by a farmer who was taking his grandson fishing. Siam was unfortunately burnt in that sugarcane field, and it is believed that she had died already by the time she was burnt. So, of course, police were called to the scene, and when police had arrived, they notified Brad, and this case really stuck with them. They became so emotional. Brad mentioned that when the police had, let out the story that they found Siam, the policeman got emotional, and Brad ended up getting so emotional because they were just so invested in this case and kind of had like a special connection with Siam and this case. They didn't know Siam personally, but they were just incredibly moved and incredibly sad over her death. And now on to Pilani's reasons for this murder. Now, according to Pilani, he had lent Siam 50,000 rand. She promised to pay it back, but couldn't pay it back. Pilani had lost his patience with Siam and decided to visit her at her workplace, which is the brothel. He had on him handcuffs and a gun, demanding the money. Because Siam couldn't come up with the money or didn't have the money on her on hand, he became even more annoyed. So Pilani's thinking was if he takes Siam, then somebody would have to cough up the money and pay it back to him in exchange for Siam's life. It so happened that Pilani had been involved in a car accident very close by to the brothel where Siam was last seen. Brad had followed up with an insurance company which pointed to the same house the rape victim had pointed out, had been taken to 2 years prior. When Brad was shown the image of the house where this rape victim was taken to, it was like a light bulb moment. This was the connecting factor. The rape victim also was able to identify Pilani in an identity parade, and the rape victim ended up becoming a complainant in the case. Pilani had intentionally not insured his vehicle. The vehicle was not in his name either. He also didn't install a tracking device. But what Pilani didn't know is that his type of car, a Mercedes-Benz Viano, installs their own tracking device. Well done, Mercedes. Which, when they traced Pilani's movements, matched all areas in question. Brothel in Margaret Mayton Drive, the accident close by to the brothel, and New Hanover, where Siam was burnt and found. Now, as I say, Brad Nathanson, the private investigator, not the police, had arrested Pilani. The defense tried to use this against them, but it didn't carry much weight because Brad was given permission by the police to catch the perpetrator. It was also discovered that Pilani had the AIDS virus. When searched, it was found that every drawer in his house, even the kitchen, had sex enhancing products. Despite Pilani's disease, there were no condoms or antiretrovirals in sight. And this led Brad to believe he was infecting the woman he slept with on purpose. Pilani also seemed to have been a con artist who was scamming people for money. Pilani was so well put together that Brad had honestly thought that he had arrested the wrong guy.
I'll never forget taking that man down and handcuffing him and looking at his attire and smelling how good he smelled, expensive aftershave, and noting that he had a Mont Blanc pen in his pocket. And I thought to myself for a fleeting moment that I'd made a mistake, that I'd arrested the wrong guy. This guy was just too plausible. He was just too well spoken. He was too well polished. He was too well finished. It was impossible.
Pilani Ntuli was arrested for the kidnapping and murder of Siam Lee.
But looks can be deceiving, and all the evidence pointed to Pilani Ntuli. And you just won't believe this. Coincidentally, Pilani had died from skin cancer. Now, because of this, he could not go to trial. He never went to trial, which is the most disappointing thing ever. Justice was never served for Siam. We have all this evidence and no one to arrest because the suspect died from skin cancer. Now, Siam had started working at the brothel just 8 months before her death. Siam had also struggled with where her life was because a lot of her friends, moved on to great colleges, great universities, It seemed like they were on the road to success with their lives, whereas she was, stuck working in a brothel. Of course, that was not the dreams and plans that she had for her life. And I feel like it's just so unfortunate that not only did she die in that manner, but she had struggled with where she was in life. So unfortunately, her life had been taken away just at 20 years old. And just a reminder to be respectful in the comments if you do choose to raise an opinion. Just because she worked in a brothel does not mean that she deserves to die. Period. Okay? No innocent person deserves to die in that manner. And at the end of the day, a mother still lost her child. So just keep that in mind. And I'm specifically saying this in this video because of the nature of work that she did. That type of work is always looked down upon. So, but it doesn't, as I said, it doesn't mean that she should have been killed. So just be respectful of the family that has lost a loved one. They are still a loved one. She's still someone's child. And her life was just taken away at such a young age, 20 years old. She had a whole life ahead of her. But anyway, guys, that is the Siam Lee case. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And if you have any requests as to what you would like me to cover, let me know in the comment section. And of course, don't forget to subscribe if this is your type of vibe. And remember, always be grateful for your life because you're loved and always needed. I'll see you in my next video. Cheers.
See ya next